All right, guys, the first thing I want you to do is, number one, understand that this market's on eggshells. I said this leaving the room today. I got to say it to those that aren't in the room or weren't there, that the market doesn't necessarily break easier than it rallies, but this whole North Korea situation creates, um, it's almost like water on a hill. It's hard to climb up it and stay up it, and that's why you've seen this market rally. You know, in the past couple of years, yeah, they'd get weak because of one scenario or another, and then they would spend the next couple of weeks rallying all the way back, and then some, making historic highs and everything. So a few weeks ago, it was the healthcare problem. They broke, and they still are near the lows of that move, which was around 23.17 even, and we're only 16 points above that 3 weeks later. So the geopolitical concerns are a little bit more worrisome than they were a year ago when North Korea would test their missiles. They start testing missiles again, we're going to go straight down in a knee-jerk reaction. So make sure you're privy to all that as you're going along trading, whether you have a position or not, right? So here's a couple of things I want to do. First of all, I'd want someone to duplicate their chart. When I say someone, when you're going through this exercise, I'd want you to go take this chart. You're going to put it on a 4 P&F. So that's one thing. So let me put mine on a 4 P&F, okay? That's a 4 P&F, right? Yes. Then on this particular chart, I'm going to get rid of everything. Because you don't want anything else on here but this 4 P&F. That's it. And then open it up so we can look at it. Get rid of everything that's on here. Just look at one thing. This is the art of simplicity. And I'm going to have better visuals for guys, promise you, coming around the corner. But I'm prepping guys for it so that when they do come, you have a better sense of how to use this stuff. A couple weeks ago, we talked about thin spot to thin spot with air pockets that this market will have between the two. We'll have an easier visual for that as well. But Les and I have been going back and forth with how well, and I always circle them and show them, but how well double thin spots work in a 4 P&F. What do we mean by that? Now, I don't want you guys to take my word for it. I want you to strip down the chart so there's no lines. Let's get rid of this line too. Nothing but the 4 P&F chart. Nothing else to distract you, to get a better visual of what the heck's going on. So this thin spot worked, but it wasn't a double thin spot. Here's the thing, and when they don't work, that's a huge clue also. That's another thing I've been saying over the last few days. If you heard it, it's good to hear it again. If you haven't, it's important to hear it. When you have good support resistance, which we have, it's almost as valuable when it doesn't work. Yeah, you might lose a little money because you're selling resistance or buying support if you're playing it, but it helps you see when the torch gets passed sooner rather than later, when good support doesn't work or good resistance doesn't work. So what do I mean by double support or double resistance? Let's look at a thin spot that's on its way down. This is an example of it. Do you see how there's back-to-back reds in the imbalance? So two prices on the way down both had imbalances. This red 527 and this red 695. That should be really, really high probability resistance around the 38 even area. Secondly, there's another situation that reared itself. These two. This should be high probability resistance, and it was. This was about a half hour or so ago, all right? When they're back-to-back on top of each other, we call them back-to-back or stacked, they're high probability areas to watch, because not only did the market, now we know the dynamic of why a thin spot would work. We go over that and have been over it time and time again, because it's showing you the speed of a market going up or down, in this case down. In this case, obviously down. We know why the dynamic would play out and work, because people are missing the sell. You're not missing a sell if it's going up because you're getting the better prices to sell it at. You only miss a sell when price is going down. You miss a buy when price is going up. So when people miss a sell, they're anxious and they wish they would have sold it where they missed it. Well, where do most people miss a sell? Where it gets fast. If it's the faster it moves, the more people miss it. It's that simple. So back-to-back thin spots that are stacked on each other, like these two examples, this one in here and then this guy up here, are more high probability support resistance. Resistance in this case, because it's red. And green back-to-back areas should hold as support. If they don't, look out below. All right? So let's go and look at, those are two, well, this isn't an instance where it worked because we haven't tested 38 quarterback on the top side. This is a perfect example of how well it worked for a long time before it broke out. Now, let's see where it didn't work. And I was coming on and saying that this is a high probability resistance and it didn't work. But what's good is, like this should have been a high probability resistance. Didn't work. But soon when it's right in here, you know it's bullish. It starts to get into the long down up bar, right? Do you see how when it doesn't work it helps you too because it doesn't surprise you the market continued to rally up to the next thin spot? This was a high probability thin spot. What could keep you from selling it, and even if you sold it right in here, you're getting out for a small loser. You're not hanging on to it. You're not hanging on to it all the way up here, I would imagine, right? So you're getting short. You're getting out pretty quick. But you also got to say, hey, this damn market just broke from way up in here. And prior to that, we were trading 39. So we break from 39 to 35, 35 to 30. And I'm now first time getting short here at 31. You got to scratch your head. If the first sequence you selling over the last 35, 40 minutes in this session was that 31 even, I'm not saying you got holes in your head, but you got to question why didn't you get short at any one point in through here or in here or when it was leaving the 38 even area? Even if you didn't see anything up there, too bad. You missed it. It moved. You don't have to predict every move, but you have to admit when you miss stuff. So you don't say, damn it, I missed the sell-off from 39 even to 30 even. Because the market really wasn't that good from like 9:15 Central to 10:30. It started moving after I shut the room down. So if you missed the move from like 10:30 to 11 o'clock, which took us down to this pink X, right? If you missed that move, you didn't necessarily have to predict it or get mad. But if you got mad and you sold it in here, you better have a short leash on it in context that the damn thing already broke 9 points and you weren't short any bit of it. Either way, it doesn't work. I'm not making excuses for something that doesn't work because when it doesn't work, it's invaluable information. This bar, it rallies too far up on this down bar, right? Therefore, it's got to go sideways. If it's going to release lower, it's got to go sideways a little bit. So here's the exercise I need guys to do. If you don't do it, that's your problem. Clear a chart, take all the noise off it, and I'm not saying things you have on your chart is noise, because there's a lot of good things people have on their charts, and there is a lot of noise people have on their charts, and it's your obligation to par things back. I went into the Edge team room, and I heard someone talking about how their wife came in the room and said, do you really look at this, that, and everything else? And they didn't have an answer for her because they don't. You got to reference stuff. And if you got too much, there's a lot of good things that you can have on your chart. But then you got to admit that there's a lot of things that sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And net, it's not really doing you much good. And you got to pair it down. I'm all for 6, 7, 8 monitors. So you could turn your head and keep it on a swivel to reference where different markets are. But you don't want a noisy chart, man, because a noisy chart just becomes, what happens is it just becomes a line. So when you look at something, if you're not understanding the tempo, the dynamic and everything else, and you just say to yourself, I have resistance at this line, and it automatically populates on your screen as a line. You know what? It could work really well, but it just becomes a line. And if it's just a line, you're not going to play it. You're not going to play it. You got to get into it and understand why it would work and understand where you'd get in and have and roll through some sort of progression. Or else it's just a line. Look at all my lines that work, you could say. Great. But what do they mean? Qualify it so you could get yourself confident in trading them. So go back to the exercise. Clear off a chart, duplicate it, and I'm not telling anyone specifically that they have too much stuff on their chart because I don't know, nor would I have the time to go through and say keep this, keep this, keep that. That's everyone's a big boy and girl in here to do that themselves. The point I'm trying to make is that take a chart, duplicate it, clear all the stuff off of it. Just look for stacked sells and stacked buy imbalances that I've coined as thin spots, all right? That Les has come in and says, hey, this might help the group. Take a look at the stacked ones. Well, I've always circled them in the trading room and everything else, but to be very specific about it and keep it as absolutely simple as possible, you're only to look back on a 4 peanut at when back-to-back reds or greens were to work and when they don't. Forget about everything else. You can see here it didn't work, but it also showed you direction because it didn't work pretty quickly, right? Don't look at this thin spot. While this thin spot right in here worked, it's not red, red, and red, correct? This guy in here worked. 38 evens will probably work when we get back up to it, probably. Here's back-to-back greens. Did not work. Did not work. Think about it. We left 2 greens in here, came back in, and slid right through it. But it also showed you, because it didn't work, a pretty dynamic or dramatic change in direction also, right? Keep it simple when you're looking at it. Keep it simple. Back-to-back greens, comes back, works. These aren't back-to-back reds. Here, triple reds. Red, red, red. It works. Well, it works once, comes in here. This is a little tough. But this was right before, I remember this sequence. This is when I thought they were going to really take the open out, and they didn't. So it works once and then comes in and gets sloppy. This was a tough, that 9:15 to 10 o'clock was really a crappy sequence. Here's back-to-back greens. Does it work? It works enough to not get killed. Back-to-back greens. Comes up. Does it work? No. Probably not. Doesn't get killed. Back-to-back reds. Do they work? Yes. Right in here. Back-to-back-to-back reds. Do they work? Yes. Right in here. Back-to-back-to-back reds, do they work? No. Change in direction. Back-to-back greens, does it work? Yes. Right in here. Support. You'd be surprised how many people, and I'm going to tell you guys this because you guys are unique. Not only are you guys trading room guys, but you're edge guys. That's the only people allowed in these weekly classes. But and they have to be classes, like coaching sessions or anything else. You got to come to class. You want to learn, you got to come to class. And the best classes are the ones that, or a lot of times the most important time to come to class is when it's easy not to have to go. Because none of you guys have to go. But this ain't college. Mommy and Daddy ain't going to bail you out. And I lost my train of thought. Every time I look and I read your comments, Carl, you throw me off. Where was I? Oh, so the exercise is not to take it. See, you see how I'm taking this chart and going from right to left and pulling it back this way? But when you pull it back that way, you already kind of know what happened. But the exercise should be pull it from right to left. Pull it this way. Or for CQG, I think it's hit Control and the right arrow. Okay? So you see this right in here? Should work as overhead resistance. Back stacked reds. It does. Well, I didn't know it does, but it is as I go across. Stacked reds, 40 quarters. See it? Right here. Should work as a resistance. It does. Goes down. Stacked reds, 39 even, right in here. Finally, when it comes back, it works. Resistance once, twice, before the third time ran up. See that? Reds, it worked once, twice before it didn't work. This is what you're talking about, right, Les? And this is what I've been talking about without being able to specifically say it like we are today. Here's what I wanted to say. Don't think that this is too simple for the masses. These guys out there are some of the, it just, you could tell them where to buy and sell it, they'll still screw it up. These guys out there. Not this group, because this group is not afraid of effort, not afraid to work hard a little bit, get your hands dirty. But I could tell this to a group of people, and 90% of them wouldn't understand it. They wouldn't even understand it. And 90% of them wouldn't even do the exercise. Do this exercise. Then, you know, someone's going to ask me, how many ticks away does it not work? And I don't have an answer for you. You got to answer that yourself. Here's another thing I would recommend. And I'm treating you guys as if you were trading for me and if you were trading my money. This is how I'm going to treat you. That if you're not trading consistent, and you know who you are, then create a strategy around this. Don't scrap everything else you did, but create a strategy around where you come up with when it doesn't work, how many ticks away. Like this thin spot. Where would you sell it? Where would you say you were wrong at? And where would you get in? One tick below it, you know, you could be scientific about it because this is pretty artistic. So you add a little art, a little science to it, you could have something. But if you're not being consistent, then work at building a strategy around these thin spots. Then you could take a 6 P&F and see if those back-to-back thin spots work any better or a little bit more methodical for you to follow. Because these can give you too many trades. But that, I don't know what too many is. It's too many for some, isn't too many for others. So I can't just blanket that with what's too many. And not play every single one of them. Because if you're not consistent right now trading, this is a strategy that's going to give you too many trades. You don't want too many trades. But at the very least, you should do the exercise of dragging it back and saying, wow, he's right. These things are pretty high probabilities for real-time support. Look at this guy right in here. It comes right down to it. I'm just going to take this chart back arbitrarily. I'm just going to whip it back, or I have no idea what happened, and say, and do this exercise for you or with you. Let's whip it back. All right. I didn't look. So now the exercise is back-to-back or stacked greens or reds. We're going into the future. I don't see any, don't see any, don't see any, don't see any, nothing, nothing. This was kind of sort of one every other one, but not officially. So we keep going. Probably a little delay on the screen share. Hang with me. Up, there's one, 38.5, 38.75, right here. See it? Price 38.5, 38.75. Should be overhead resistance. It is. It leaks through it a tick or two, but works. Whoa! Back to back to back. Stack, 4 stack here. Sounds like Carl's breakfast order. 37.25 down to 36 half. Should there be resistance in there? Yep. Is there? Yep. Once. Twice. Well, 35 even, 35.25, back to back. Should be resistance. Probably wouldn't have got filled, but it did work. Didn't quite get up there, right? Did come back off. Oh, another one. Should it work? Yes. And it does. Once, twice. Back-to-back greens right in here. Half 75. Does it work? Nah, I would say probably not. If I would have bought this, I'd have tried to puke it. And it would have did work, but this wasn't a great one. It leaked through it a couple ticks. I tried probably scratch it, would have scratched it and been mad because it worked, but whatever. It's good when it doesn't work, and it does that. Oh, here's one. Back to back to back, around 33.50. Does it work? Oh, here's another one right in here. That one kind of sort of doesn't work. Sloppy. But it's nice when it doesn't work. Gives you a chance to get the hell out. You see that? Only goes up a couple ticks. Let's see if this works, if we ever come back up to it. No. Kind of sloppy. Kind of sort of worked, but not really. Comes back to it. This probably back-to-back reds. It doesn't really work that time. Then you're going to find the ones maybe in the middle of a range are less probable than if they're pushing out of a range. Make sense? You'll find differences sometimes between the ones that work and the ones that don't work. Like if they're too far back, maybe they don't work, or they go after another one above it. Green one right in here is going to work to the tick. So I'm not going to continue to do it. Let's see the 31 evens if they come back. No, never retraced up there. What this does is instead of me doing it, instead of me telling you about it, teaching about it, and being the only guy collaborating around it, these exercises allow you to see it and get confidence and get yourself into the market. But these are going to be your like they've been for a long time for us, your best real-time, near-term support resistance. And as you've heard me say a million times, what do most people suck at? Real-time analysis. This is giving you more real-time analysis. This stuff isn't coming in a profile, volume or market. It's not rolling into a profile for those guys who analyze. But the same reason why an LVN or a single would work in market and volume profile theory, it's the same reason why these thin spots work. Stack thin spots. Do an exercise, watch it. Depending on how you're trading, capitalize on the probabilities, but let yourself prove that the probabilities are there. Don't let me or anybody else tell you that. That's all I got for you today. Any questions? All right, good question, Bruce. Do I look at them as support or resistance after you blow through them? Yes, I would. And then that's a question you'd be able to answer, you know, what once you're doing it. I think you'd come up with a number, and I would say it's about 3 or 4 ticks. If it goes through at 3 or 4 ticks, it's a directional transitional moment. In that's high probability. So it just happened when we were coming on at 11 o'clock. See this back-to-back red here? Once it got a few ticks through it, it's like, and it does work as good support. Resistance that didn't work, good support that does work. But as soon as it gets through it a few ticks, and I don't know if that number is a few, I think so, then it's a directional change, and the other side has the leash. Exactly, Peter. Good point. Second smartest guy in Illinois says, even a lot of times the ones that don't work give you an opportunity to scratch it or make a few ticks. There's usually not a lot of trap traders on support resistance that works. That's why they work. You don't want people opening positions, opening longs in support or opening up. If you think about this, you don't want people opening up shorts in resistance. I'm going to draw this on the chart. If this is resistance and this line down here is support and the market's coming down to support, I want people trying to get the hell out of a short, and that's why they're buying it. I don't want people trying to buy it to get long, because if they're buying to get long, boom, they pop up as a seller. What happens when you guys get long? When we get long, what happens to our dome? A sell order pops up at the right above. So you want people in support to be trying to cover a short, because when they buy it, if they get filled, they don't turn into a seller. They're flat. Make sense? And then if they don't get filled, that's the reason why it goes up, because then they start to jump. That's that whole baby bird story. But so then the same thing with resistance. You get up to resistance, right? If this line is resistance, I don't want people selling to get short, because then they turn into a buyer below. I want people trying to sell to cover a long. And why? Because they probably missed covering the long because the damn thing ran through real fast through here when it went down. So it really makes sense why the dynamic and the metaphors and the stories around why people miss something when it moves fast. We all miss things when it moves fast. The kind of car it was. The faster something moves, the more people missed seeing it or acting upon it. Faster the dare moves, harder to shoot. So if it comes back to that same spot and slows down, you're anxious to shoot that son of a bitch. Zane, I'll cover that one again, so don't worry. That's a good question. Another good question by Bruce. One of the smartest guys out of Indiana. Watch for absorb. So if it's coming back to that stacked area, do what you would do to watch and play any support resistance. Only know that there's more probabilities that this one's going to work. You want to watch for absorption. You want to wait for a stuck long or short in the filter that would validate it, or you just want to sell it, or an ancillary. That's what I mean by building the strategy yourself. Ancillaries to me are the best. So if it gets close to this area, let's say this was a stacked red, and it gets close to it, I'm looking for an ancillary to get hit, to go down quick. Then I could take a shot, sell it aggressively, and see if I get anything out of it. And if you're wrong, you'd scalp it for a little profit. If you're right, you'll get the move. That's it for this session. I'm going to stop the recording.